Hey there. So on this Mondays with Moriniki, we're going to talk about intention versus impact. And I'm gonna be honest, like we've talked about this before, but I felt like it needed to be or warranted another conversation and bears repeating. And it's mainly because I had this revelation about why I think there's such a disconnect as it relates to intention versus impact. And I think that's because there's this tension between wanting to extend people grace when they say that wasn't my intention, I didn't mean for that to happen, and wanting to kind of hold them accountable for the impact of what their actions are. And so, like, let me use a practical example. Like, let's say, like, a person, we'll call her Sally, does something for Nancy, and she did it because she thought it would be helpful and Nancy would be pleased. And that's great. Like, her intentions were great. However, in reality, that action has now caused frustration, challenges, issues, whatever, for Gerald. And so, Gerald expresses his frustration, says what happened, and what's the response? And like we all know what it is. It's like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I didn't intend for that to happen. I meant well, my intentions were in the right place. So fine, but what happens when you hear those phrases and that kind of delivery is this expectation that that now should mitigate or wipe the slate clean or kind of minimize the reactions or consequences because it wasn't the intention. And so despite what the impact is, that should be outweighed by the intentions behind it. And so again, let's go with it. Like, let's extend grace. We communicate the problem, we extend the grace, and we move on. Now, the issue is when we move from like one-offs to patterns. And that's what I want to talk about because now you have the data. So you did the thing one time, we talked about what the impact was, it wasn't the intention, fine. But then you do it again, and then you do it again. And so now there's a pattern, and now we have data, and this pattern is kind of establishing known outcomes. Like, when you engage in certain behaviors, this is what's going to happen. This is the havoc is going to wreak. This is the, frustration or consequence it's going to cause. So, like, drop in the comment, let me know. But, like, for you, at what point does it move from kind of innocent impact to intentional inconveniences? At what point do you start to hold someone accountable and be like, it's not well intended. It's actually just ignoring what is the effect to me. And so, by saying like my intentions were this and expecting that always to override the inconvenience that I'm experiencing, what you're really saying is like you don't actually care about the impact. You don't actually care about the negative effect that is to me. And to be honest, like that's fine, but that's never what anyone will say that they're saying. But like I want you to say that. I want you to say it like 10 toes down. Like, yep, I know that's going to inconvenience you and I don't care. Because that's in effect when you engage in repeated behavior, what you are communicating to the person or persons who's constantly on the kind of negative end of that action. And so, I just flag that because I think these types of phrases get used a lot, especially now. And I'm interested in your thoughts. So again, I want you to chime in and let me know because I feel like I hear this phrase all the time. And I want to be that friend who tells y'all that at some point we have to start being accountable, both as individuals who say the phrase, like we have to kind of recognize that we're wielding it and using it and that's kind of letting us off the hook, but also in people who let people continue to use it against us. Because at the end of the day, the intention is to do something that benefits someone. And in doing so, you're creating a problem for me. And eventually, I have to take ownership of how I'm allowing other people to treat me, how I'm allowing you to treat me, because now I'm teaching you a very powerful lesson. And it's really simple. It's, what you perceive the consequence to be of disappointing this other individual is greater than what you now know the consequence to be of frustrating me because I have consistently let you get away with it. And that's really what it is. Like every time you constantly let someone get away with it, you're just teaching them that it'll be okay and you might get upset with them. You might be like a little venting, but you'll move on. But the price and the consequence of disappointing you is less than what they perceive the price or consequence is of disappointing that other person. And so at some point, this is where you get into a conversation of just having to adjust, access and boundaries, because there's no real, other than you being like grr for a second or whatever, consequence to that behavior. So let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear for you, at what point do you start to shift and hold people accountable differently when they continue to engage in these repeated behaviors and patterns? And I'll talk to you next week.